So we've always had the human element to some degree in technology, but I don't think ever to the point where we are right now, where you can just sit down and have a conversation with the AI engine, whether you choose to talk to it or whether it chooses to talk back with you or exactly how you plan to interact with it. But I think there's a lot of people that now are looking at it and going, okay, well, it has become a fairly significant force multiplier. When you say, I'm going to go use this to solve this particular problem, then whatever that problem might be, you're probably going to be able to come to some kind of resolution in a very, very short amount of time compared to if you had to sit down and write it out and go research it from scratch. So different people have got different, what I call force multipliers. So if you invest an hour, what is your return that you're getting if you had to go do it by hand? And I've heard, 5 to 1, 10 to 1, 20 to 1, and as high as 40 to 1 if it's a really complicated problem that people would want to go after and solve. So let's open it up for some questions and discussion right now. What problems do you see that are coming to the forefront? And if you would either raise your hand or just go ahead and just speak up, I would appreciate that. So otherwise, I'm going to start calling on you to talk about it. Go ahead, Jay Paul.
You and I talked about this, I don't know, maybe 10 days ago, but one of the things that AI seems to be subject to is keeping from smoking its own dope, so to speak. And so a lot of the things in the first iteration of a problem prompt to solve a problem, you'll create particularly in the tech world, and this is not legal, but in the tech world, if you've got something that needs to be estimated or come up with something, it'll produce the first run on that. And there's always a need to go back, as you mentioned on several of these discussions, always a need to go back and confirm the foundation, the assumptions, and that sort of thing, calculations. But even so, that result remains a part of the lexicon, perhaps, or the literature that AI then potentially reaches back on. So if you have something that's 90% correct on the first turn, or even 80% correct, something like that, and then how do you prevent in successive iterations of the large language models from incorporating those inaccuracies into its future?
I think yeah, and I get that point. Shashi, I'm going to let you speak to that if you have a second.
Tell me, what do you want me to speak about?
I want you to speak about the ambiguousness that can come back in on second and third rounds of solving the same problem over and over again. You may get one answer the first time, another answer the second time, and I think you've perfected approaches for
got it. Yeah, I think so. For that, there's basically it comes down to how we model it. Basically, there is think of it as we have a bunch of knobs on these models that you can control. One of the things I think me and Lee went through this, where we can make it give it the same answer 100 times if you ask it. Okay, but it also loses some of the creativity and things like that. So it depends on your specific application. And based on that, that's how you would manage it. So there's a couple of things. One is with the OpenAI and the other APIs. They give you some of these controls back to you that you can control over an API, but not through your normal chat window. So programmatically, you can control some of it. But if you build your own LLM and manage like we are doing, you have much more honed, specific, tuned controls over that.
Shashi, does that continue to reduce the creativity that AI is supposed to be presenting?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a trade-off. Okay, so what do you want? Are you writing a novel, a fictional novel? Are you doing life-saving work, right?
Right.
So I think you have to look at what's your use case. So, and based on your use case, you want to make it as you go onto the left side, which is where you want it to be very accurate and stuff. Not only you use the AI, then you do checks and balances on top of this, auditing, controls. You increase a lot of the overhead to do that. Yeah.
So
I
essentially,
think
just like any other engine or technology or weapon, as an example, it can be offensive or defensive.
Yeah.
So the point is how you use it and how you control its use by others.
Well, I think
Exactly.
again, I think for anybody who's considering using AI in any environment where there's interactions, you have to establish some foundational elements, right, about how to treat AI to avoid bias, or
Right.
to anticipate what that bias might be. The first step is always like, making sure that you have diverse training data, right? You have to have data that has a data set that ensures that it has the widest range of perspectives and identities and the culture and experiences that are included. That's part one. Then you have to monitor for bias to make sure that the training data that's coming in and anything that you're presenting, right, has biases related to race or ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, et cetera. All right. You got to monitor for that. You got to know whether or not you're putting in skewed data. The old adage of garbage in, garbage out, that really applies here. And then you want a balanced representation of that data, which is to make sure that, look, if you've got, and again, if I pick on healthcare, because, a lot of the large language models right now are being used in healthcare. They've got a diverse set of data, but the diverse set of data is largely, American population as opposed to European or whatever. And so they're having a hard time in identifying, ethnicity-based or cultural-based issues because there's not enough of the records that are incorporated, because the subculture that sits below the poverty line, right, may not have as good a medical record as someone who's more affluent. So you have to think about that. Then the next thing is really about how you design your prompts, right? It's all about prompt engineering, and we've gone through that in a couple of sessions. But, again, making sure that your language is neutral, making sure that you've got multiple perspectives in the prompt, and making sure that you have context awareness, which is to provide relative context and background information to help the model understand. You have to help it. You're talking to a 10-year-old that's brilliant, right? So you need to really figure out how you're going to explain to them in simple terms to understand and incorporate these designs. And then you have to have what I call bias detection and mitigation, right? You have to have some tools that allow you to identify the biases, adjusting the weight of the model, right? Retaining more diverse data and filtering or correcting those biased outputs, right? So you've got to have a story to tell there. And then the last piece of the puzzle, well, actually, there's two more pieces of the puzzle. The last one is really human in the loop, right? So AI is not designed to replace humans, right? But it is designed so that a human oversight, right, which has feedback and the ability to actually fold that into the model and the usage. And, did you like this? Like one of the things that we've done in a couple of prompts have been, okay, after you deliver your results and your analytics and you give me a write-up, ask me how I think about it. What are my thoughts about it, right? And do I like this? And ask me to elaborate, right? Because we want to store all that information, because that also helps with the algorithmic changes that you might make further down the road. So it's really making sure that a human is reviewing it and contributing to the review, and that you're then doing, regular audits. You're looking at transparency. You're making sure that you have the mitigation efforts documented so that you have that. I know Amy would yell at me if I didn't say that. And then lastly, algorithmic fairness, right? And that's where you get the math and science kids to really looking at metrics and determining what is a fair assessment of this model and how it's behaving. So you really need to, it's a very comprehensive approach, but the human interaction with AI, and I always describe it to clients and the people we work with, is that, listen, Microsoft coined it the best. They said it's a co-pilot, right? It's your digital assistant. It is somebody that's there to help you. And I always use the analogy, if you're a surgeon and you're operating on somebody and you have AI enablement and something's whispering in your ear and saying, you know what, you might want to go 2 centimeters above that particular place. I'm not good with Latin or any of the biology terms, but guiding them and saying you'll achieve a 98% effective rate of cutting out the cancer if you go to this location versus the other, and you're getting a helping hand, so to speak. That's AI at its best, okay? Yes, we can automate processes. Yes, we can change other things. But in terms of how AI can actually be used in business today, you really need to think about it from that three-dimensional perspective that I just described.
Yep. Very good. Thanks. Sherry.
Yes, Lee, thank you. I wanted to just add to this, just in case, there are people that are not familiar with the underpinnings, and I think Shashi was, alluding to this before too. What I think really need to keep in mind and go back to is that we are really working with analytics, right? We're really working with the engine underneath, and a lot of innovation that has been entered into the market in the past 10 to 20 years that we call AI, right? And it is artificial intelligence, but what it really is it's deep analytics that are being used to first describe what we want to do, whether that's a problem or it's something that we want to add to the universe, predict what's going to happen next, and then prescribe what we want to do. So if you go back to its roots and you think about what the analytic problem is that AI is meant to solve, I completely agree that the human in the loop is critical to the success of what we're doing. But I would challenge us all to think about, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to first describe, right? Which is the basics. If you think about problems of inventory, right? What is your current inventory? What are your turns, and so on? We all recognize that as sort of old school descriptive analysis of the situation, right? And we predict what's going to happen based on our knowledge that's been described in the first round of analytics. Then we prescribe what we want to do next. What we're doing is we're essentially handing over a lot of that control and the ability to make those tasks happen, right? The predictive and the prescriptive, with automation that's attached to it. So, think about the problem also, whether you want to create your own LLM, like Shashi talked about before, where you remove all of the potential for other people's bad data to cloud your results, or you use the accumulated knowledge, the accumulated descriptive, predictive, and descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive, analysis of others, joining it together. You can't remove the biases or the issues that they may have put in that created some bad data, but you can benefit, right? If you keep focus on that. So I would just challenge us all to think basics of what we're trying to do. What is the problem or the issue we're trying to describe first? What are we trying to predict as a result of it? And then what do we want to hand over to the machines to do in concert with it?
AI today requires these models and the way that they're working, Bard and Anthropic and ChatGPT, all of them and others, of course, are still reliant on prompt engineering, and their level of automation stops at a certain threshold. It stops. It can't keep learning from unless you're changing the prompts, and you can't automate the prompt responses as part of an overall conversation today. It's coming, but it's not there yet. Hopefully, Tom, that answered your question.
Thanks, Ken.
Hey, Ken, this is Eddie. Just kind of following up on the private models, in the IT space, for years and years, as we moved into distributed systems and the customer environments became more and more complex, compatibility matrices and, OEMs had to maintain a lot of data and actually built, teams and groups of people to prevent errors in configuration. So I can see that most companies in that space are probably need to, or if they're not already, building their own private models specifically for those purposes. And I was talking to a leader at Avari yesterday, and they're convinced that the whole value-added reseller space is going to change. Far fewer sales reps, more technical people, just because of the direction that we're moving in here.
Yeah, I see that as well, and I would embrace it and say that the sales job is going to morph. It's not going to be, you'll need to have more of a skill set. Sales is not going to go away. Sales is still at the crux of our economy. It's never going to devolve in that respect. But the the flashy sales guy who doesn't need to know a lot and just says, hey, you really want to buy these things, and all about creating spiffs and incentives and trying to get you to buy, that will go away. Like that if you go by, even if you look back and you say, okay, let's look at the auto industry and look at how sales have transformed in the auto industry since the 1960s, right? It used to be, car salespeople were thought of as really slimy and greasy, and do you want clear coat with that? And now it's haggle free, right? And because the consumer's driving that demand, number one, they don't want to hassle. They don't want to hassle. They want to just be able to go in and get it. But more importantly, the configurators that have been built by all these websites that are out there to say, oh, we can build your thing. Okay, add this, take out this, take out this, take out that. Okay, here's the price. Is that the best you could do? Yes, no, maybe, right? And so it became a much more simplified process. And I think you'll start to see that in that same context. And you brought up a good point, is that when you look at parts distribution or product design, that's where AI can actually make it a lot easier as well. And again, this is going off tangent here, so I apologize to this group, but 2 years ago, a company called Zbeck came out with this tri-screen, which allows you to plug 2 extender laptop screens into your laptop. So basically, picture that you have a laptop with 3 screens, right? Works really well. It's sold for like $500 or whatever it was, and they're very handy, especially if you're on the go. And as a result of the pandemic, you don't want to have your own office anymore. Okay, you need 3 screens, whatever. Now they came out with a new version of it, and it was iterated by AI. And AI said, you know what? It's too much of a pain in the butt to take this apart, and you have to plug it in a certain way, and you got to do it. They made it much simpler. It's a much cleaner environment now. They doubled the price, but I see that as the next iteration in product development as well, is that AI looking at customer feedback and analyzing that and helping to drive design is where AI can really shine here. So that's just an example.